Hello again, you absolutely phenomenal people, you. I cannot believe how many of you take the time to comment, take the time to reassure Indigenous and non. You are just making this YouTube experience just absolutely amazing. And don't ever doubt that I don't love you for it, because I do. Now, this is my weekly podcast, and it's definitely a longer version of my videos. I kind of think of it, if I could figure out a way to be sitting, cross-legged in my chair in front of a fireplace doing that, that's definitely the vibe I'm trying to get for this. So, and I should have put my phone on silent. It is now on silent. All good. But there's some things I wanted to talk to you about this week. And then the main part of this episode, we're going to talk about the bingo card I shared with you. The inappropriate terms bingo card definitely got so many questions and so much interest and so many emails about that. So obviously, you asked, I'm going to respond. But first, I really wanted to share with you kind of what I've been doing behind the scenes. And in one of my recent videos, I shared about safe spaces and how, as marginalized people, not even just Indigenous, but marginalized people, we need to know a place is safe. And what I mean by safe is if I walk into your home, I hope you can guarantee that I'm not going to have to put up with some ignorant racial slur while I'm there, because if I do, in that second, that space is not safe. Now, if you defend me and tell the person that that's inappropriate and ask them to apologize or to leave or whatever, then you've maintained the safe space. But a safe space is a place we can go where we know we don't have to worry about that. I can go to my daughter's home and I know it's safe. I know my home is safe. I know the places my friends' homes are safe. And the agencies I work with are safe. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I mentioned in a previous video that I started my business on Facebook, and how I adamantly defend that space as Indigenous-centered, which means when we're talking about Indigenous issues, I don't want to hear, well, that also applies to everyone else. That may be true, but right here in this space, we're talking about Indigenous issues and Indigenous viewpoints, Indigenous-centered, because there's just not enough places in this world yet that are Indigenous-centered, especially online. And I also adamantly defend that safe space. If someone says something ignorant, depending on how bad it is, I may just remove it, or if it's really bad, they're getting blocked, deleted. That's the case. I have brought those practices to YouTube. So heads up. And now my subscribers, I would bet my last buck, are not an issue. Unless you subscribe just to be a troll, then I feel sorry for you. But I don't think that's what happened. 90% of my comments are amazing. And 10% aren't. So if you're going to comment and you're going to attack another group, I mean, we had transphobic comments on my channel. That is gross, and they got eliminated as soon as I saw them. There were anti-Indigenous comments. Those people got blocked, deleted. So if I'm going to do my best to make sure that when you come to my channel and you choose to read the comments, which that's taking a risk in itself, that you're not going to see something offensive. Now, obviously, you got to be open to an Indigenous worldview, because that's definitely what you're going to find here. And if that is new to you, then I invite you to sit and contemplate it. Don't argue it. Don't demand clarification. Sit with it. In the same way that we sit with the words of our elders, even if we don't understand them yet, we know that in time we will. But if you see something offensive, feel free to call it out. Use this space as a practice space. Like, just the words, that's inappropriate, or what I teach my audiences, just type, ouch, that hurt, ouch. I'm going to see that, and then I will take action. But I just wanted to let you know that. And then the other thing I got to comment on, which kind of made me laugh, kind of made me upset at a point, kind of went through a whole bunch of emotions. But this week I released the video, and I was talking about, it was entitled something along the lines of, we needed Buffy to be Indigenous. And reading the comments made me ask for the very first time, like, did they even watch the video? Because if you do, what I was talking about is internalized oppression. The fact that marginalized people, they just get to a point where you don't even believe you could be successful. And then that's why seeing Buffy on Sesame Street or on the stage or winning her awards helped us shatter that illusion and that oppression, and that was huge. And in that video, I asked everyone to have a little bit of compassion for the people that still defend her, because maybe they're not able to take out that foundational piece of their existence yet. That's not easy. And I shared how I'm in an empowered place, so I was able to do that. But so many Indigenous people can't say that yet. But what blew me away was the comments about, like, you didn't need her to be famous. You didn't need her to be an example. And it's like, did you watch the video? Because yes, I did. I absolutely did. I needed someone to show me that Indigenous doesn't just mean impoverished. It doesn't mean spit on. It doesn't mean that everyone on this planet is going to look down on us. And if you got to understand, that is the Indigenous reality for so many people. That may not be your reality, and we could waste a whole bunch of time saying it shouldn't be that way, but it is. So we did need her to be, and that's why this is so devastating. And if you still don't understand that, one, you can go rewatch the video. Two, sit with it. Just one of the biggest issues with Canada, I'm going to talk about Canada for a second, and I'm pretty sure it applies to the US too. My United States subscribers can comment and let me know if I'm on the right page. But one of the biggest problems before we started talking about marginalized people, because this is a fairly new conversation, white men, specifically people in power, would make laws and make decisions and assume because it worked for them that it would work for everyone. And we know that's not true. So many of those laws and decisions didn't work for women of every background. They didn't work for marginalized people. By the way, women belong to a marginalized group. That's why missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, you got Indigenous and women, double whammy. So when watching my videos, if it doesn't apply to you, understand that it probably does apply to the Indigenous people you may or may not know. My mom, I'm going to jump into a tangent here. Like I said, podcasts tend to go longer. I warned you. My mom used to get me and my brother to stand back to back in the living room and get us to look around the room from where we were standing. And she would highlight for both of us that each one of us could see so much of the room. But there was one part of the room we were completely blind to. And that happened to be the part directly in front of, for me, it was the part in front of my brother, and for him, the part in front of me. That's what I'm talking about with these videos. If what I say isn't your reality, understand that's the part of the room you can't see. And that is obvious to us. And that's why diversity is so important. And that's why not only listening to each other, but believing each other is so important. And again, that is why when we have someone pretending to be someone she's not, it is so incredibly devastating. So I hope that makes sense. Last but not least, the bingo card. So I printed out a copy. Mine is black and white. Sorry, it looks really good in color. But we're going to go through each one of these one by one so that I make sure that you understand why they're on this card. Now, if you belong to my community, and I haven't yet figured out if you have to sign up for the membership to take part in the community. That might be the case. YouTube is new to me. So I'm still figuring this out. But in the community, I actually shared the card. So that's where I'm hoping to do all my interacting is in the community. If you were to send me an email and ask me nicely, be polite, I'll send you a copy. And then you can print out your own and you can have amazing discussions with people. Because if nothing else, I love assisting people to have important discussions. So let's jump into this. There is 4 times 4, 16 terms. The first term is Indian giver. So that is the term that is used when, I remember this so much from when I was a kid, someone gives you something and then they take it back. And you would call them an Indian giver. By the way, before I go any further, I know there's a lot of American people watching my videos. Kind of have to issue a warning for my Canadian followers. In Canada, calling someone an Indian, an Indigenous person an Indian, is considered incredibly derogatory. That you would not do that. In the U.S., it's still a term that's used on a regular basis. So in the case of these terms, Indian's usually the word that's used because it's a derogatory term. So again, with Indian giver, someone gives you something and they take it back and you call them an Indian giver. And I always thought that was humorous, for lack of a better word, because by calling someone that, you are acknowledging what the Canadian government, and probably the U.S. government as well, has done to Indigenous people. The history of giving us something and taking it back, or those empty promises. So it is highly derogatory. And of course, just using the term would be insulting to any Indigenous person that hears it. So let's cross that one off the list. Now I'm really leaning on my U.S. subscribers. The next one is off the reservation, talking about someone going off the reservation. And I have heard it so many times on shows like NCIS and Bull. I've definitely heard it on all those kind of shows that you watch in the evenings. And I love those. I'm not complaining at all. But when they're referring to someone, it is always the case of someone is being very erratic, they're out of control, they disappeared, or they caused a big kerfuffle, and they refer to the person as off the reservation, which is so insulting because it implies that if an Indigenous person comes off the reservation, that they won't be under control. It's the whole we're uncivilized stereotype. So absolutely insulting, and let's not ever use that phrase again either. The next one is chief. And the way I explained this recently, because of course, if it's a chief of a community, calling him chief is not going to be derogatory unless you just like, hey, chief, that's going to be disrespectful. But calling someone chief, for one, every time I've heard it used, they're referring to like a cab driver or a waiter, someone in a service industry that's like waiting on you or providing you services. So it's a power dynamic thing. The other thing is, like, you wouldn't walk around calling someone, hey, Prime Minister, or hey, Minister. You're taking a position of respect and value in our communities and turning it into just a slang nickname. So please don't. Not good. The next one, this is one that I'm kind of surprised that not a lot more people knew this. It was definitely, maybe they just don't teach it in school anymore. It was definitely something we knew. So it's the whole idea of scalping, which is the practice of when the French and the British were settling and first arriving in Canada and they're warring with each other. Both sides had Indigenous allies. And of course, you want to kill off your enemy, right? That's what was going on. So both the French and the British had to come up with a way for their Indigenous allies to prove that they had killed one of the enemy. And what they asked the Indigenous allies to do was to scalp them, to cut off the top of the French person or British person, depending on who's commenting or asking of this, bring back the top of their head, and then the Indigenous ally would be compensated, that's the word, for that. So many people attribute that to Indigenous people because we were the ones doing it, but that was not our invention. That was not our request. You can blame that on the Europeans that brought it to our shore. So that's 4 of them. How are you doing so far? Now, not all First Nations cultures involve powwow. I am Anishinaabe, I am an Ojibwe female, and we most definitely have powwow. It is a gathering. It's a social gathering. There's a lot of sacred ceremonies that happen there. It was a way to touch base with family, and celebrate the kids that were born and remember the elders and family members that had passed on. And we just celebrate our culture and share good food, and it's just a really good time. I'm really pushing the definition here, but for those that don't understand, the powwow is our equivalent of a mass. You go to church, you have the mass, you see friends there, you stand outside the church and get caught up on the gossip and the details, same kind of deal. Don't refer to a meeting as a powwow. A powwow is so much more than just a group of people ending up in the same room. And I know one of my Facebook followers, when I shared this to not call a meeting a powwow, she wrote the comment that every single time my boss used to say that, her response, she's Indigenous, by the way, her response was, oh, great, we're going to sing and dance. So just, again, it's downgrading something that's incredibly important to us to just another meeting. Don't do it. Don't do it. Another one I haven't heard in a while. That might be because the circle of people I hang out with has changed over the years. But the saying, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Can we stick to too many cooks in the kitchen? That's way more appropriate. Right? So they're implying that there's too many people in charge. You don't need to drag our culture into that. Okay? So let's just not. Don't go Indian on me. So this one was really interesting in the seminar when I was going through these recently with an audience of people. And I know in my life it was used a lot when I was going to get upset about something or someone else was going to get upset, and they were saying in a roundabout way, like, don't blow a gasket, like, don't overreact, don't go Indian on me. So again, there's that uncivilized stereotype. But what my audience pointed out to me, and I had a few young Indigenous people in the audience, younger, not young, not kids, but younger than me. And what they said is they heard it every single time they dared to have a drink. Like if they were going to have a beer with friends, the response was often, well, yeah, okay, that's okay. I'd love it if you had a beer with me, just don't go Indian on me. And that's just that whole stereotype that Indigenous people can't drink alcohol. And I mean, it's just insulting when we fall back on these stereotypes. So again, we're going to stop using that phrase. The next one, go back to where you came from. I hope every single one of you just left and that you all realize how absolutely ridiculous that is, because we are where we came from. Maybe the person that says that should consider going back to where they came from. That one's just ridiculous and should not be used. The next one is right in line with Don't Go Indian on Me. It's the warpath. Someone's on the warpath. It's talking about someone that's upset or out to talk to someone about whatever they're upset about. The problem is when you say they're on the warpath, what you're implying is they're overreacting. You're minimizing how upset they are. You're contributing it to them just overreacting rather than trying to find out if they have a valid reason to be upset. So again, it's just very disempowering, very insulting. Let's not use it. Along the lines of warpath, on the other side of that would be circle the wagons. So anytime a threat is coming, often a supervisor or boss will use the phrase, well, we got to circle the wagons. Indigenous people are not the enemy. In fact, settlers would not have survived in this new environment if it wasn't for the Indigenous allies that taught them how to survive a Canadian winter. We have never been the enemy unless, in the case again of the French and the British, that our European allies told us that that group is our enemy, right? So it literally goes against my teachings. We're all about sharing this environment, but we're also about taking care of this environment. That's when it becomes a problem. So circling the wagons is a flashback to the settlers seeing us as an enemy and circling the wagons to protect themselves. Let's not circle the wagons. No one's attacking, even when we're upset. How about maybe help us solve the problem instead? I don't know if this applies in the States, so I'm definitely coming at this from a Canadian perspective, but the whole check day or treaty day. And again, back to an audience I was working with, I asked them if they had ever heard this. Definitely had heard it. Excuse me, I have to eat something. And I asked the audience, it's like, so what is check day or treaty day? And one brave soul, he was brave enough to answer and be honest. He just said, well, that's the day you get your money. With all the snarkiness he could find. I thought that was hilarious. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. How much money do you think we get? And he was like, I don't know, but you get your money. Like, you could tell he thought it was like ridiculous amounts of money. So for the record, I live in the city of Thunder Bay, which is in the 1850 Robinson Superior Treaty area. This area gets $4 a year, the First Nations that are signed to that treaty. $4 a year. Now, I'm from Treaty 3, which is just west of here, the bougie Indigenous, from what I've figured out. We get $5 a year. Are you jealous? We can't even afford Starbucks with that. There are so many misconceptions out there about money. I saw on Google that supposedly there's some big payout when we turn 18. There was no big payout when we turn 18. Sorry. That's not accurate. So there is a lot of misinformation out there. Don't assume what you've heard or were told is true, because the person that told you might have been told the stereotype as well. So you're an adult now, you get to unpack this stuff. That's a part of reconciliation. This one I've had to explain so many times, but it is the one that really blows people away, and it's the low man on the totem pole. Now, for one, in Anishinaabe country, in Ojibwe country, using that phrase doesn't even make sense, because we don't have totem poles. Ojibwe people were migrant. Think of the teepee. You could take it down and move it. We followed the moose and the deer. We did not have permanent settlements until that was imposed on us. Now, our brothers and sisters in southern Ontario, the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee, they had totem poles in front of their longhouses. They were farmers. They were very, in one place. They were not migrant. And of course, out on the BC coast, we know beautiful totem poles. So a couple things play into this one. There is no hierarchy in my culture. We sit in the circle all at the same level. There is no one more important than any other. The chief of the community is not more important than another member of that community. We sit in the circle together. So the reference to low man is already a colonial influence. And then the part that drives me nuts, because I spent a good month out in BC. I was considering moving out there. This is ages ago. But I started looking at the totem poles, and I saw a lot of them. I made a point. I went searching them out. I wanted to learn the teachings of the area. That did not resonate with me, by the way, because it was not my homelands. That's important to us. And what I saw over and over again is the spirit that was represented in the bottom section of the totem pole was a fish or water spirit. The one in the middle existed on land, and the one at the top was a bird. It was referring to their environments, not who's more important. The honor was to be on the totem pole, not where you appeared. So can we stop using that one, please? What did I hear? First step of the ladder. I was like, hey, I like that. That's a great alternative. That was suggested by one of my followers. Wasn't me. Definitely going to use it. Calling anyone Pocahontas or Honest Injun, can we not? So I'm going to split those up. Pocahontas. Throw that into Google. Because Disney really did us a disservice. That was not a love story. Her name wasn't even Pocahontas. I should have researched that before I did this video, but that's not her name. And she was literally the first missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It was a young child that was taken. So let's not call anyone that. And Honest Injun, I haven't heard this one in a long time, granted, and I hope I never hear it again. And it's the same as someone saying, trust me, you should trust, like, I'm telling you the truth, honest, right? I'm Honest Injun, or talking about someone else as an Honest Injun, except, and it's INJUN, that's why I'm pronouncing it that way. The problem is with the stereotypes of the time and the stereotypical view of Indigenous people, they believed when this was popular that there was no such thing as an Honest Injun, that you shouldn't trust us. So let's kill that one too. We're down to the last three, and here's another huge one that has been so warped by colonial influence that even Indigenous people are using it wrong now. And what I'm talking about is Indian time. So first off, let's start with the sacred traditional teaching. Many Indigenous cultures, I can't say all of them because I haven't been exposed to all of them. Mine specifically, definitely Anishinaabe culture, believe that everything happens when it's meant to. So if I was supposed to have a meeting with someone and for whatever reason it had to be canceled, our belief is either someone who really needs to be at that meeting couldn't make it that day, so Creator made sure that the meeting didn't happen because they need to be there. Or, and this has definitely happened to me, I was hired to do a seminar. It ended up being rescheduled. Before the new date, I ended up receiving all these new teachings and clarity, and it totally changed what I was able to offer that community. That seminar happened when it was meant to. I hadn't yet received the teachings that they desperately needed. That's what Indian time means. It means we're not going to rush it. We're not going to try to make it happen today. If it can't, it wasn't meant to. And now this is where it gets warped. Indian time is not an excuse to be disrespectful. Respect is one of the 7 grandfather teachings. It is not an excuse just to show up whenever you want. It is not an excuse to just be lazy and I'm not going to bother trying. I mean, I can think of so many Indigenous that are the hardest working people I know. So anyone that comes in late, just, taking their sweet time, you know what I almost said, and they tell you, oh, I'm just operating on Indian time. Not only are they being racist in that moment, but they're being totally disrespectful. I wake up 3 hours before I have to leave for an event, and I live my entire life on Indian time. But that doesn't mean I'm ever going to disrespect the people that are waiting to meet with me. So let's really stop using that really lousy version of a sacred teaching. Can you tell I'm passionate about that one? 2 more. Okay. If I could wave, hang on. I just realized, wait a minute, I'm going to find it. Yes, I have my magic wand. I always say if I could wave a magic wand, I actually knew where it was. Hang on, can I still make this work? See, it lights up. Yes, it thrills me. I like my props. What can I say? If I could wave a magic wand, no one would ever use the phrase pulling the race card ever again. Ever. And that is because it is only used when an Indigenous person is upset about something. They usually, because they're calling out a racist comment or a person that's acting and speaking in a racist way, and that's being totally minimized and saying, well, they're just pulling the race card. It's no big deal. Which means you're totally disregarding what we're trying to tell you. Remember the back-to-back teaching? I can see something you can't, but if you don't listen to me, then you're disrespecting me too. And we see it time and time again, always when it comes to racism. The Indigenous community will come forward and say that, that store owner is incredibly racist to Indigenous people. And the non-Indigenous community will come out and say, well, they never treat us that way. Missing a key point there. You're not Indigenous, of course they don't treat you that way. Again, if you're not going to accept as truth, or at least consider what someone else sees, if you don't acknowledge that you never see the whole picture, I will never look at this world as a white male. But their opinion is valuable. They can see things that I can't see. If I believe what they tell me and they believe what I tell them, we can have a complete picture together, or a more complete picture. You see what I mean? So we're not just pulling the race card. Quit just disregarding what we have to say. That is a huge part of the problem. And the last one. This is such a personal pet peeve of mine. And there's so many, it always seems to be like a women's empowerment group. And I'm all about empowerment. Excuse me, I'm a marginalized woman that found a way to stand on her feet and be successful. Of course I'm into empowerment. And yes, I pass those teachings on to young men and women. But don't use the word tribe. Especially if the word is being used to describe a whole group of white women. My response when someone uses that word, and I realize in the States you refer to Indigenous nations as that tribe. That's not what, it's a First Nation here in Canada, so it's not a word we use. But my response to them using that word is always, if you're not including the people that word references, don't use the word. If there are no Indigenous people in your group, you have no business using that word. If there's no marginalized people, now, still, even if there was marginalized people, if there's no Indigenous, I'd have an issue with it. Because if there's one thing that's well documented, non-Indigenous North Americans have operated with this extraction mentality. I want to take from you what I need and forget the rest. So I want to take the parts of your culture that I think are cool. I want to refer to things as powwow. I want to talk about my group as a tribe, but I really want nothing to do with the people. And this mentality has to end. There you have it, my friend. The bingo card of inappropriate terms. Remember, again, send me an email and I'll send you a copy if you're interested. Any of them catch you off guard? Which ones surprised you? How many of them, repeat the video. Did you get a bingo? Did you get a full card? How many of those have you heard used? Once again, just a huge chimagwech, a huge thank you to all of my new subscribers and the subscribers who have been with me forever. You just make my life so amazing. You have just added yet another element to prove to me that those limitations that I thought I operated under just do not exist anymore. And I'm not sure if they did in the past. That might have just been me and my internalized oppression. Until next week, I love you. Take care. Bye-bye.